What would you do if your entire life collapsed right at the altar? My name is Roberta Hayes. 4 hours ago, I was supposed to become someone's wife. Instead, I watched the two people I trusted most, my fiancé and my maid of honor, destroy everything. Not in private, not days before, but behind the altar, at my wedding, in my dress, with her lipstick still on his mouth. Now I'm sitting in a dusty shed that used to be a pottery studio covered in clay and shattered dreams, wondering how I got here and why this broken place might be the very thing that saves me. Because sometimes the biggest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people who swore to stand by you forever. And sometimes the most beautiful revenge is healing louder than they ever expected. You think you can just destroy my life and walk away? I screamed those words at Blake, my voice echoing through the cold, silent vestibule of St. Agnes Church. My white silk wedding gown clung to me, like it knew the shame I was drowning in, and the echo of my heels across marble tiles sounded more like a warning than a celebration. Jessica's lipstick, my maid of honor, was still smeared across Blake's mouth, the same lipstick she'd applied in the dressing room while handing me tissues and saying, "You deserve happiness more than anyone, Roberta." The same woman who toasted to our forever at my bachelorette party. The same woman who helped me pick out the very dress I was now suffocating in. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My name is Roberta Hayes, 27 years old, and 4 hours ago I was supposed to become Roberta Collins. But instead, I watched my 3-year relationship implode because my fiancé and my best friend decided to share one final secret before I walked down the aisle. They thought they could hide behind the altar. They thought I wouldn't walk in early. They thought wrong. Blake stammered. His mouth opened and closed like a man grasping for air. "Roberta, please." It didn't mean anything, he pleaded, stepping toward me like I hadn't just seen him with her lips on his. It was nerves. A moment of weakness. Just please let me explain. But I didn't need his explanation. I'd seen enough. I yanked my hand away before he could touch me. A moment of weakness, I hissed. No, that was a moment of truth. And then Jessica, still in her bridesmaid dress, no shame in her eyes, stepped forward, like she was the one who had been wronged. "Roberta, you have to understand. I don't have to understand anything." I snapped, my voice shaking. "You were my best friend. You were supposed to protect me, not replace me." Somewhere down the hall, the organ music began. My father was waiting to walk me down the aisle. My mother was in the front row with tears in her eyes. My co-workers, my cousins, my childhood piano teacher. Everyone was out there expecting a fairy tale, and I was about to give them silence. As I turned away from them, both clutching my ruined gown, Blake reached out one last time. "Where are you going to go? What are you going to do?" I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "Anywhere but here." And in that moment, I realized the horrifying truth: I had nowhere to go. Not really. The drive to Penny's farm felt like both an escape and a punishment. 2 hours of winding roads, each mile echoing the clank of tin cans, still tied to my bumper leftover wedding decorations I hadn't bothered to rip off. The sign on the back of my car still read, "Just Married." The irony was so bitter, it could have broken teeth. I had called Penny from the church parking lot, still in my gown, still shaking. My voice cracked as I whispered into the phone, "Penny, I need somewhere to go. Blake cheated with Jessica." There was a pause. I think she expected me to say anything else, but she didn't ask questions. She just said, "You can come here." Penny was 3 years older than me, married to Gerald since high school and living the farm life just outside Clarksville, Tennessee. They raised cattle, grew soybeans, and had 2 college-age boys, Dylan and Caleb, home for the summer. I had always envied her steady, quiet world. But now I was crashing into it like a storm no one invited. When I pulled into the gravel driveway near midnight, the porch light was already on. Penny stood with a mug of coffee and a look that said everything without saying anything. She hugged me hard like she could squeeze the betrayal out of my bones. And for the first time since leaving the church, I let myself cry without holding back. "The main house is a mess right now," she said gently. "We're doing renovations and the boys are sleeping in the guest room. But I've got the old pottery studio out back. It's got a cot electricity and running water." She looked at me apologetically like it wasn't enough, but it was more than enough. The studio was really just a converted garage from her artistic phase 5 years earlier, clay-stained, dusty, cluttered. Cobwebs in the corners, abandoned bags of dried clay, but it had walls and a door and quiet. That was all I needed. I stepped inside still wearing my wedding dress. The train caught on a stool. My heel broke. I collapsed onto a dusty couch and just stared at the pottery wheel in the corner. The same wheel I remembered Penny using years ago, her hands spinning hope from earth. Back then I'd watched her shape bowls and mugs while I talked about office drama and wedding colors. Now those stories felt like they belonged to a stranger. Before she left me to rest, Penny turned back. "I'm sorry about what happened today, but maybe this is a blessing in disguise. Blake never seemed like he truly saw you." I nodded numbly, not ready to believe her. Not yet. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there in the same ruined dress phone, buzzing every few minutes with incoming calls and messages. My mom's 17 missed texts, my dad's 6 calls. Even my boss had left a voicemail. "Heard what happened. Please call when you're safe." But it was Blake's texts that made me feel physically ill. "Baby, please come home." I panicked. "I don't love her. I love you. Let's just talk." One mistake doesn't erase everything, but it did. It did erase everything. I shut off my phone and walked out into the early morning haze. The sky was painted in bruised pinks and oranges. Roosters crowed in the distance. Cows grazed lazily behind a fence line, and for the first time in years, I was completely disconnected. Penny waved at me from near the clothesline, but didn't approach. She gave me space, the kind of space I hadn't even realized I needed. When I returned to the studio, something pulled me toward the pottery wheel. I don't know why. Maybe it was the way it sat there still and waiting. Maybe I just wanted to touch anything that didn't lie. I found an old bag of clay that hadn't fully dried. I added water, kneaded it like Penny once taught me, and placed it on the wheel. My first attempt, a total disaster. The clay wobbled. It collapsed. It slung off the side and hit the floor with a thud. But it didn't yell at me, didn't betray me, didn't lie. And somehow that made it feel safe. By the afternoon, I was a mess, covered in clay eyes, swollen gown, ruined. But my mind was finally quiet. Penny walked in arms crossed with a gentle smile. "You look better." "I feel better," I said honestly. "There's something about this that makes sense." She nodded. "Clay doesn't lie to you, doesn't cheat on you. It just becomes what you shape it into." I stared at the spinning wheel. Maybe this broken little room was the only place where things could make sense again. 3 days into living in Penny's pottery studio, my hands were cracked and caked with clay. The air still smelled faintly of dust and regret, but the quiet had become my sanctuary. I'd fallen into a rhythm wake at sunrise, open the studio windows, and sit at the wheel. Sometimes I didn't even create anything worth keeping, but each rotation of the wheel, each collapse of clay, felt like a heartbeat, one I controlled. Blake's voice still echoed in my mind. "You can't seriously want to live like this. This isn't you." Maybe he was right. Maybe I was hiding. But there was something honest about the dirt under my fingernails, something real in shaping chaos into form. Each piece I made was like a memory in my hands, soft, fragile, begging to be held right. I started making small bowls, then vases, some cracked, some caved. But I didn't stop. I was alone. But I was no longer adrift, until he came back. It was a Thursday morning. Warm blue sky, and I was elbows deep in a stubborn coil bowl that just wouldn't hold shape. Then I heard it, the low growl of a BMW engine crunching up the gravel driveway. My stomach dropped. I looked out the dusty window, and there he was, Blake, in a tailored charcoal suit like he was going to a board meeting instead of ambushing his ex-fiancé on a farm. His eyes scanned the yard, then landed on the studio. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight to the door and knocked. "Roberta, I know you're in there. We need to talk." I didn't want to answer. I wanted him to rot outside. But I knew Blake. He wouldn't leave, not without forcing a scene. I wiped my hands on a towel, walked to the door, and opened it, blocking the entryway with my body. "What do you want, Blake?" His face looked thinner, hollow. Stubble covered the chin that used to be meticulously groomed. "I want you," he said, his voice low. "I want my fiancé back." I didn't blink. "I'm not your fiancé anymore. Come on, Roberta, don't do this." "I messed up, okay? It was a mistake. Jessica was a mistake. We had history, but I didn't love her. You know that." He tried to reach for my hand. I stepped back. "I don't care who you loved. You made a choice. You humiliated me. On my wedding day with my best friend." Blake's voice hardened. "So what, you're just gonna live here now in a shed covered in mud like some artsy farm girl?" He glanced past me at the shelves lined with drying pottery. "You can't seriously think this is a life. What, you're going to sell bowls on Etsy now. This is beneath you." And there it was. The truth behind the mask. Not regret. Not love. Contempt. "You think this is pathetic?" I asked, stepping aside just enough for him to see the full studio. "Every piece in here has more soul than anything we ever built together." Blake scoffed. "You're better than this, Roberta." I stared at him, then back at my wheel. "You know what? Maybe I'm not. Maybe this is exactly who I am, and maybe that's why you never really saw me." He paused. His face flickered with something panic, maybe. "Jessica and I are done." It meant nothing. Don't throw away 3 years over something so stupid. 3 years? And yet when he needed comfort, he turned to her. "I'm not throwing anything away," I said, my voice steady now. "You did. I'm just finally picking up the pieces." He shook his head. "This is insane. You're going to regret this. One day you'll wake up and realize you walked away from the best thing that ever happened to you." He turned, slamming the door behind him. And for a second, just a second, I wondered if he was right. That night, I sat in the studio surrounded by half-finished pieces. Blake's words kept swirling in my head like water on the wheel. "This isn't real. No one will care about your little hobby. You're going to regret this." What if he was right? What if I was just playing artist in a barn, running from pain instead of facing it? But then I looked at the bowl I'd been working on all morning. Its sides were uneven, warped, but still standing. A little ugly, a little off. But mine. And for the first time since Blake kissed Jessica, I whispered out loud, "Maybe broken doesn't mean worthless. Maybe it just means different." It was a Tuesday when she showed up. I wasn't expecting visitors, especially not her. I was in the studio, sleeves rolled covered in clay, and defeat wrestling with a vase that refused to stay upright. My focus was so intense I barely heard the knock at the side door. Roberta Penny called softly, "Eleanor's here." Borrowing some tools from Gerald. I wiped my hands and peeked outside. That's when I saw her. Eleanor Blackwood, retired art professor from Austin P., 60-something. Silver hair pulled into a loose bun, eyes sharp enough to slice through excuses. She painted landscapes, now lived down the road, and was something of a local legend in art circles. She glanced toward the studio, then paused. "What's this building again?" she asked Penny. "Oh, that's just the old pottery shed." Penny shrugged. "My cousin's been staying there. She's going through something." Eleanor's gaze drifted to the window, to my shelves, to my clay. Without invitation, she stepped closer, peered through the dusty pane like she was reading a secret. After a long moment, she turned to me and said, "Whose work is that?" My stomach twisted. "Mine," I said cautiously, "but I'm not. It's just for therapy. I'm not really an artist or anything." Eleanor squinted. "You're lying. Those pieces, those are stories." She stepped inside the studio without waiting, her eyes scanning each creation like a museum curator. She picked up a jagged-edged bowl I had shaped the morning after Blake's visit. Deliberate cracks, bold imperfections. This is extraordinary, she murmured. Raw, honest, painful, and yet intentional. I stared, stunned. It's about betrayal, I whispered, but also about trying to rebuild. Eleanor nodded slowly. Have you ever shown these to anyone outside this farm? I shook my head. Just Penny. I wasn't planning to show them at all. Well, she said firmly, you need to start planning differently. She stayed for hours that day, asked questions about my process, my pain, my perspective. I told her everything. About Blake, about Jessica, about the church, the dress, the screaming silence of the ride to Clarksville. She didn't flinch, didn't interrupt, just listened, absorbing every syllable like they were paint strokes. Then she said something I'll never forget. The strongest artists are forged in fire. You're not sculpting clay, you're sculpting survival. She encouraged me to photograph my pieces, to create a small portfolio, to name the collection. We called it Broken Beautiful. Over the next 2 weeks, Eleanor became more than a mentor. She was a midwife to a new version of me, one I hadn't dared to imagine. She brought lighting equipment, a camera, a tripod. We spent long afternoons photographing each piece, carefully curating a story from wreckage. Each bowl, each vase, each sculpture became a chapter, a picture with a shattered handle. Loss of trust. A sculpture shaped like a heart reassembled with visible seams, choosing to love again. A bowl with metallic gold running through cracks, inspired by kintsugi, the Japanese art of embracing imperfection. Eleanor said, "You're not hiding your damage, you're declaring it." And that's when I realized so many people out there are walking around feeling like broken pottery, chipped, flawed, forgotten. But maybe they're not ruined. Maybe they just need someone to say, "You're still art." One morning, Eleanor arrived holding a clipboard. "I signed you up for a booth at the Clarksville Arts and Crafts Fair, September event." I nearly choked. "What, Eleanor? No, I can't. I'm not ready. I've only been doing this for 2 months. She smiled. "Art doesn't care about your timeline. If your work speaks, let it speak." I spent the next few weeks consumed, not just in creation, but in curation. I wanted a cohesive narrative, a journey from ruin to restoration. I shaped, glazed, reshaped. I cried, I bled, I healed. Each piece was a fragment of me, each imperfection intentional. The morning of the Clarksville Arts and Crafts Fair was bright, warm, and cruelly perfect. The kind of weather I used to imagine for my wedding day. Now, instead of walking down an aisle, I stood behind a 6-foot folding table beneath a white pop-up tent, flanked by bowls, vases, and sculptures that looked like pieces of my soul laid bare for strangers to judge. I had never felt so naked. Eleanor helped me set up the booth. She had made signage that read, "Broken Beautiful Pottery by Roberta Hayes." Underneath it, in small script, "Healing Clay, Art from Ruin." Every piece was tagged and priced. I had no idea what I was doing. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, the fair opened. People wandered by, sipping coffee, petting dogs, dragging reluctant kids. I braced myself for awkward silence or polite pity glances, but instead, something strange happened. People stopped. They leaned in. They stared not at me, but at the pieces. One by one, they picked them up, ran their fingers over the cracks, traced the seams, and they talked. This reminds me of my divorce. My son passed away last year. This feels like grief. I didn't know pottery could hurt and heal at the same time. The first sale came from a woman in her 50s, tired eyes, wedding ring gone. She held a small sculpture of a heart held together with bronze seams. "This," she said softly, "looks like how I feel inside." She bought it, then a bowl, then a vase. She hugged me before she left. By noon, I'd sold half my inventory, but what stunned me more than the money was the stories. People didn't just want art, they wanted healing. That's when a voice broke through the crowd. "I'm Dr. Patricia Williams," the woman said, holding out her hand. "I'm a therapist in Nashville. I work with trauma clients." I blinked, not sure where this was going. I've never seen pottery that captures emotional restoration so tangibly. Would you ever consider making pieces specifically for my practice? I have clients who can't speak about what they've been through, but I think your work could speak for them. I was stunned. Yes, I whispered. Absolutely yes. And just like that, the orders began stacking. Custom commissions, therapy pieces, private sessions to hear people's pain and translate it into sculpture. The fair ended with tears in my eyes. I had come terrified that no one would understand me. I left knowing that my grief had become a bridge. 2 weeks later, Eleanor knocked on the studio door holding her phone. "You're going to want to sit down for this." A reporter from the local Clarksville station had visited the fair, seen my booth, and asked to do a story. Just a small feature, I thought. 15 seconds of airtime tops, but she had spent an hour filming, asking about my process, my heartbreak, my story. That story aired on a Friday night. By Monday morning, everything exploded. Emails, DMs, calls. People from all over Tennessee and even Kentucky and Georgia reached out. Some wanted to order. Some wanted to talk. Some just said, "I saw your segment. I left a toxic marriage last year and didn't know how to feel until I saw your bowl." Then Eleanor delivered the next gut punch. "I showed your photos to a friend in Nashville, Victoria Holbrook. She owns Luminous Gallery, one of the top contemporary spaces in the city. She wants to come out and meet you." I stared at her. "No, I'm not ready for a gallery. I've never even sold art before this month." Eleanor smiled. "Art doesn't wait for you to feel ready. It waits for you to get real. And honey, you're already there." Victoria came the following Saturday. Elegant, sharp, mid-40s, wore a silk scarf like it was armor. She said almost nothing for the first 20 minutes. Just walked around the studio, picked up each piece, turned them over, read the tiny handwritten tags I had taped on the bottom, still standing. Fractured faith, the vase that knew too much. Then she asked, "Tell me about this one." She pointed to a bowl I had made after Blake's second visit. It had gold seams, but also a deliberate crack running straight through the center. "It's about how beauty doesn't have to mean symmetry," I said quietly. "Sometimes we carry scars we don't want to fix because they're the reason we survived." Victoria nodded slowly, then looked me dead in the eyes. "I'd like to offer you a solo show." I blinked. "A what?" "A full solo exhibition," she said calmly. 3 months from now, December. We'll call it Healing Clay Beauty Born from Brokenness. It's time people see what you've been through. 6 months had passed since the church, since the dress, since the lipstick. 6 months since I whispered anywhere but here and fled into the Tennessee night. Now Penny stood in the studio doorway blinking at the line of cars that stretched from the gravel road into her front yard. People sat patiently with paper numbers like a pottery pilgrimage. Some clutched tissues, others held journals. One woman carried a framed photo of her late son. Penny turned to me stunned. "Roberta, what is all this?" I smiled, hands covered in clay. "This is what happens when you stop chasing perfection and start offering truth." The pottery studio was no longer a dusty garage. It had become a sanctuary. Shelves lined the walls filled with my broken, beautiful collection. A side table offered tea, a small couch for consultations. Dylan Penny's artistically gifted son managed inventory and emails after school. And me, I wasn't hiding anymore. I was guiding. People came from across the state, not to browse, but to be seen. A woman commissioned a sculpture to honor her late husband's sobriety. A teenager asked for a bowl that represented surviving bullying. A young man wanted a cracked vase for his mother who'd just walked away from a 20-year toxic marriage. Each session began the same. I'd ask, "What hurt you?" They'd pause, then tell me. And then I'd create. Word spread far beyond Tennessee. Therapists began incorporating my pieces into trauma work. Hospitals ordered custom commissions for grief counseling rooms. A university reached out to host an exhibit on art and emotional resilience. And then came the call that sealed everything a national lifestyle show, Morning Window, wanted to feature my story. We saw the local segment. The producer said, "You're not just an artist, you're a movement. People need to know what you're building out there in that shed." But as my life took flight, Blake and Jessica's came crashing down. They got married quietly 5 months after the wedding disaster. But the honeymoon didn't last. A month later, rumors began circulating. Jessica had opened multiple lines of credit in Blake's name. Blake had taken out loans using Jessica's father's business contacts without permission. It wasn't long before texts leaked. Screenshots cold incriminating sent by a former mutual friend. Proof that the affair had started not weeks before our wedding, but 7 months earlier. Hidden beneath layers of late meetings and just venting, and you're overthinking it, Roberta. I didn't speak publicly, didn't post a thing, didn't even respond to the people who sent me the screenshots, because by then, I didn't need revenge. I had purpose. The solo show at Luminous Gallery opened in December. It was titled exactly as Victoria had promised, Healing Clay Beauty Born from Brokenness. The gallery was packed. Reporters, collectors, strangers who had followed my journey from viral segment to feature story. But more than that, survivors, people who had been betrayed, hurt, left behind. They came not for the art, but for the recognition. And as I stood at the center of that room looking at pieces I had once made in a broken dress with shaking hands, I realized something. Blake and Jessica weren't my ending. They were just the trigger, the beginning of everything. Today, the old studio has a new name, Healing Clay Studio Custom Therapeutic Pottery by Appointment. There's a wait list, a workshop series, and a scholarship fund for trauma survivors who want to learn the art of rebuilding through creation. We host story nights. We fire pieces shaped by grief, trauma, loss, and rebirth, and each one bears a mark, a golden seam, or a visible crack, proof that imperfection can be sacred. My father came to see the studio last month. He didn't say much at first, just looked around, ran his calloused hand over a piece titled, Still Here. Then he turned to me, eyes glossy, and said, "You built something more real than any wedding ever could." As for Penny, she never once asked me to leave. Instead, she turned the farm into a healing retreat with my studio at its center. What once was a side building filled with dust and regret is now a beacon. People say they come for the pottery, but I think they really come to remember that they're not alone in their pain, that healing is art, and that sometimes the life we're supposed to have starts right after the one we thought we needed ends. Some say the worst day of your life can break you. But what if it doesn't? What if it just strips away the illusions so you can finally see the truth that you were always the artist, the creator, the survivor? Not because you were perfect, but because you were willing to begin again. If you've ever been betrayed, left behind, or made to feel disposable, let this story remind you you're still here. You're still clay, and you are still art. Have you ever turned heartbreak into healing? Share your story below. I promise you, someone needs to hear it. Like this video if Roberta's journey gave you strength. Subscribe for more true stories of betrayal, resilience, and quiet revenge turned into unstoppable power. What would you do if the woman you gave everything for called you a failure in front of your entire family and didn't even know she was being recorded? I was alone in my hotel room, still in my blazer from a long day at the real estate conference, when my phone buzzed. A text from my cousin, Jenna. "You need to see this, I'm so sorry." Attached was a live stream link. She said she didn't realize what was being said until it was too late. I clicked it, and everything changed. There on screen was my mother sitting at our family dining table, wine glass in hand, completely unaware she was being broadcast live on the internet. "Oh, please," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "My daughter thinks selling houses makes her successful. She couldn't hack it in nursing school. Now she's just wandering through life like a desperate failure." I froze. My chest tightened. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. She was talking about me, mocking me. with my aunts and uncles around her laughing, all these grand dreams about becoming a nurse, and now she just sells houses to people who actually succeeded in life. My name is Sinead Sid Sullivan. I'm 32 years old, and for the past 5 years, I've quietly paid for every one of my mother's medical bills. Nobody at that table knew the truth. When Mom was diagnosed with aggressive rheumatoid arthritis, I dropped out of nursing school. I was thriving, aced my classes, building toward a career I loved. But then came the call. Mom had collapsed at work. From that moment on, everything changed. She cried in the hospital bed, whispering, "How am I supposed to afford this?" Her insurance barely covered anything. So I stepped in. I promised I'd figure it out, that I'd take care of her. I picked up real estate because it offered flexibility and decent income. While other agents chased commissions, I was driving to her appointments, handling insurance paperwork, and covering every dime her treatments required. Her medications, her specialists, the weekly physical therapy, it added up fast. But I made it work. I worked 60-hour weeks, ate budget dinners, and emptied my savings over $100 over 5 years. And she knew, or at least I thought she did, because sometimes she'd look at me and say, "You've become so responsible." Those rare moments of gratitude kept me going, kept me hoping that deep down she appreciated what I gave up. But that live stream shattered the illusion. Remember when she dropped out of nursing school, my mom laughed on the video. She came home crying because the exams were too hard. Pathetic. I sat in silence, in my hotel room, crying. Because I hadn't dropped out, because I couldn't handle it, I left to save her. And the wine she was sipping, I bought that. For family dinners she didn't even invite me to this time. She called me a failure while living off my sacrifice. And no one at the table objected. They laughed, they nodded along. That wasn't pain talking. That wasn't old school motivation. That was betrayal, raw and deliberate. I drove home from Providence in a fog. 2 hours on the interstate, but I barely remembered the drive. All I could hear was her voice echoing in my head like a wound that wouldn't close. She doesn't have what it takes. Some people just aren't cut out for real achievement. Words she never would have dared say to my face, but happily poured out to an audience online. I hadn't told my mom I was coming back early. She thought I was still in Providence networking and shaking hands. But I had something more important to do. Jenna texted again, "I'm at the coffee shop on Maple. Meet when you're ready." I grabbed the manila folder I'd carried for years labeled Mom Medical. Inside 5 years of meticulous records, every prescription receipt, insurance forms, bank statements, copays, specialist visits, mileage logs from doctor runs, over $120,000 in documented support, not for taxes, not for reimbursement, just so I could keep track of the life I was putting on hold. I slid into the booth across from Jenna, her oversized headphones perched around her neck and guilt written across her face. "I'm so sorry, Sid," she blurted. "I didn't know she'd say that stuff. I just thought I was filming a normal dinner." I opened the folder between us. Actually, I said quietly, "Thank you." Her eyes scanned the documents. Pages and pages. This is thousands of dollars. Over $100,000 I corrected. I put my nursing dreams, my savings, even my relationships on pause. For her. She looked up, no longer shocked. Now angry. And she calls you a failure. That's messed up. I nodded, feeling something shift in me. I'd always thought her harsh words were just pain talking, that maybe under the lectures and criticism there was pride. But that video proved it. She didn't see me at all. Not as a daughter. Not as a person. Jenna asked the question I hadn't even said out loud yet. "So, what are you going to do?" I didn't hesitate. "I'm done." That afternoon, I filed the paperwork to remove myself from all of her insurance and medical accounts. No confrontation, no warning, just freedom. Then I opened my banking app. For 5 years, I'd been saving what little I could for someday for nursing school. I transferred every penny into my personal account. I've spent 5 years being her safety net, I told Jenna. That ends today. And then I showed her something I hadn't shared with anyone else, an acceptance letter. I'd been reaccepted into the nursing program months ago. I almost deferred again because of Mom's latest round of treatments. But not this time. I start in the fall, I said, and I'm not deferring again. The next morning, I didn't drive Mom to her doctor's appointment. I didn't refill her prescription. I didn't answer her calls. Instead, I sat at my dining room table, papers spread across the surface like a battlefield, and began cutting every financial tie I had to her. I called the insurance company. You want to remove yourself as guarantor on Patricia Sullivan's account. Yes, effective immediately. Her premiums will increase substantially. I understand. Please send the confirmation to her home address. The letter would arrive in a week. Just enough time to get ahead of the explosion I knew was coming. Her text started around noon. Where are you? The doctor's office says, my card got declined. Fix this now, Sinead. Are you ignoring me? Answer your damn phone. Each message only made me feel lighter, freer. I silenced the phone and turned to the next task, my family. I opened a blank email to every relative who ever commented on how strong my mom was, every aunt, uncle, cousin who'd praised her sacrifices. Subject line, important my role in Patricia Sullivan's care. Dear family. After much reflection, I've decided to step back from managing my mother's medical care and finances. For the past 5 years, I've been solely responsible for over $120,000 in expenses, medications, insurance premiums, specialist visits, and more. Attached is a detailed record of everything I've covered, in case any of you would like to offer support going forward. This decision was not made lightly. Best Sinead, I attached the spreadsheet. No emotion, just facts. Let them see the numbers. Let them see the reality behind the woman they thought was helpless. Jenna sent me the full video later that evening, the original live stream now removed from her profile. I downloaded it. Saved 3 copies. I didn't know if I'd ever need it, but part of me wanted to. I was reviewing client files when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, my mother's face flushed, fists clenched, rage barely contained. I didn't open the door. Sinead, I know you're in there. What are you doing? You missed my appointment. My medication was denied. Open this door? I spoke calmly through the wood. You'll be getting information from the insurance company soon. I suggest you read it carefully. Silence. Then, is this about money? After everything I've done for you, I nearly laughed. Goodbye, Mom. Please don't come back. I walked away. Her voice faded behind me, and with every step I felt something fall away, like I was finally peeling off a skin that never fit me to begin with. The family reaction came fast. Group chats exploded. Aunt Maureen, I'm appalled you'd abandon your mother like this. Uncle James selfish, cruel. Cousin Thomas, sort out your petty drama in private. Only Jenna and my great-aunt Bridget responded with kindness. It takes courage to stand up for yourself, Bridget wrote. Call me if you need anything, dear. Everyone else blocked. Their silence, strangely peaceful. 3 days later, I walked across the campus of Boston City Nursing School with a backpack on my shoulder and hope in my chest. The admissions advisor raised an eyebrow as she flipped through my reactivation file. You've been out of the program for quite a while, Miss Sullivan. Yes, but I've kept studying. I'm ready. I was more than ready. The placement exam was scheduled for the following Friday. I had every old textbook bookmarked, highlighted, and worn at the edges, from late-night study sessions squeezed between open houses and insurance calls. For the first time in years, I was choosing myself. I still had my real estate business, but I scaled it back, hired Kylie, a smart college student, to handle appointments and paperwork while I focused on school. The income dip was noticeable, but so was the relief. No more surprise copays. No more managing someone else's crisis. My home felt quiet. My headspace even quieter. I didn't think much of the Boston Real Estate Association's annual gala. I'd ignored the event for years, too busy juggling obligations to care about networking. But when my broker nominated me for the Resilience in Real Estate Award, I was stunned. You're a shoo-in, said my colleague Jeffrey. You supported your mother, kept your business alive, and now you're back in nursing school. That's next-level grit. I didn't expect to win, But I went to the ceremony anyway. I bought myself a new dress. My first personal splurge in years. Navy blue. Simple. Elegant. For once, the only role I was playing was me. As the ballroom filled, my phone buzzed. Once. Then again. Then 5 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. A text popped up, "It's Jenna, using Uncle Patrick's phone. Emergency. Call back ASAP." My heart dropped. I stepped into the hallway and called her back. "I'm so sorry, Sid," she said. "I'm at the hospital with your mom." She collapsed. They think it's a reaction to her new medication. She's asking for you. That familiar pressure twisted in my gut. The guilt, the fear, the reflex to drop everything. But it didn't consume me this time. Is she stable? Yes, but they're keeping her overnight. Uncle Patrick is here too. The crowd in the ballroom began filing in for the awards presentation. "I'll come after the event," I said calmly. "Please tell the doctors I'll answer any questions they have tonight." Jenna hesitated. "Are you sure I'm not abandoning her?" I said. "I'm just not abandoning myself either." Back inside, the lights dimmed. The MC stepped up to the microphone. "And the Resilience in Real Estate Award goes to..." Sinead Sullivan. Applause erupted. Jeffrey practically shoved me out of my seat with a grin. As I walked to the stage, I felt the weight of 5 long years of sacrifice, silence, gaslighting fall behind me like a shadow that had finally lost its grip. The crystal trophy felt heavier than expected in my hands. "Thank you," I began, voice steady. "This means more than I can express." I looked out at a sea of colleagues, peers, people who only knew me as the agent who got results, not the daughter who gave up everything. Real estate isn't just about selling homes. It's about navigating chaos, adapting, finding solutions when it seems impossible. Those same skills got me through the hardest years of my life. A pause. And now I'm pursuing my original dream. I've re-enrolled in nursing school. This award isn't just about resilience in business. It's about the power to reinvent yourself at any age after any storm. Applause again, this time louder, warmer. I didn't just survive, I evolved. The hospital was quiet when I arrived. I still had my crystal trophy in my tote bag, its weight grounding me, not as a weapon, but as proof. Proof that I hadn't failed, that I'd built something real despite everything. I entered the room. My mother was sitting up in bed, alert, her hospital bracelet clinking softly as she adjusted the blanket. Uncle Patrick sat beside her. Jenna stood near the window, tense. Mom's eyes narrowed the second she saw me. "Well, nice of you to finally show up," she said, voice dripping with bitterness. "I collapsed. I could have died. And you were off partying." Uncle Patrick cleared his throat awkwardly. "The doctor said it was a mild reaction to the new meds. She's stable now." I nodded. "I'm glad to hear that." Mom looked furious at my calm tone. She wanted a fight. She wanted guilt. "This wouldn't have happened if you hadn't abandoned me. My new insurance is trash. These doctors don't understand my condition." "That must be hard," I said, adjusting to a new care team. She blinked, confused. "Is that all you have to say after everything you've put me through?" I turned to Jenna, who gave me a small nod. "It was time." "Mom," I said quietly, "for 5 years, I gave you everything. I paused my life. I funded your care. I fought insurance companies. I drove you everywhere. I put off my dreams because you needed me." Her jaw tightened. "And in return, I continued. You mocked me. On a live stream, in front of our family. You called me pathetic." Uncle Patrick looked stunned. "What live stream?" he asked. Jenna stepped forward, voice steady. "I accidentally streamed the family dinner a few months ago. I didn't mean to record it, but..." It caught everything she said. My mother paled. "That's not relevant. You're twisting things." I reached into my tote bag, pulled out the trophy, set it on the bedside table. The engraved words gleamed under the fluorescent light, "Resilience in Real Estate, Sinead Sullivan." I turned to Patrick. "I won this tonight, for running a successful business while supporting her full-time." The silence in the room was thick. "I didn't come here to fight," I added. I came because the doctors needed background. That's all." My mother looked at the trophy like it was a weapon. "You think that little award makes you better than me?" she hissed. "No," I said, "but it reminds me I'm enough, and I won't keep sacrificing my life for someone who doesn't see my worth." Patrick looked between us, finally understanding the depth of what had been hidden behind closed doors. "You really did all that he asked quietly." I nodded. "Everything. And more." My mother said nothing. For the first time in her life, she had no defense. As I turned to leave, I glanced back at her. She didn't ask me to stay. She didn't apologize. But she didn't insult me either. Maybe that silence was the closest she could come to acknowledgement. "Jenna," I said. "Want a ride home?" She nodded quickly, grateful. As we walked down the hallway, I felt the tightness in my chest loosen, like I could finally exhale. I hadn't just stood up to my mother, I had stood up for myself. 3 months later, I stood at the foot of a hospital bed, not as a visitor, but as a nurse in training. My hands were steady, my voice calm. "IV secured," I said to my instructor, who gave an approving nod. I was exactly where I was meant to be. After my shift, I walked to my car textbooks and my passenger seat clipboard tucked under my arm. My phone buzzed. A message from Jenna Prof interview going viral, 20K views already. Last week, the Boston Medical Journal had profiled a group of career changers entering healthcare. I'd shared my story, real estate agent turned nursing student blending business acumen with empathy and grit. Both careers require trust communication and the ability to guide people through transitions, I'd told the reporter. But nursing taught me something even more important: how to protect your boundaries without losing your compassion. As I smiled at the memory, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Sinead, it's Patrick." My uncle's voice was hesitant. I saw the interview. It was inspiring. I didn't expect that. "Thank you," I said softly. He continued slowly. "Your mother saw it too. She didn't say much, but I think it hit her. Seeing you in that uniform, realizing you really are doing it." He paused. "I just wanted to say I'm proud of you, and I'm sorry I didn't see it all sooner." I blinked back tears. "Thank you, Patrick. That means a lot." When we hung up, I sat in the car for a while. I didn't need his validation. Not anymore. But it felt good. Not because it changed who I was, but because it confirmed who I'd become. In my living room, the real estate award trophy still sat on the mantel. Next to it, my nursing textbooks, a folded copy of my acceptance letter, and a stethoscope I'd bought with my first scholarship check. My mother and I hadn't spoken since that night in the hospital, and maybe we never would. But I'd stopped needing apologies from people who couldn't give them. I found closure in my own success, my own peace, my own purpose. I had clients to serve, patients to heal, a life to live that belonged entirely to me, and that was the victory I'd waited for all along. Have you ever given your all to someone only to be left behind when it mattered most? Tell your story in the comments. Hit like if you've ever had to reclaim your voice. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of betrayal, resilience, and powerful comebacks. This is Sinead's story, but it could be any of ours. Because sometimes the best way to heal is to walk away. My daughter-in-law is a worthless woman. Evelyn's voice shattered the hospital hallway like a cracked mirror. What good are you if you can't even give us grandchildren? I sat frozen in the hard plastic chair, the medical report trembling in my hands. Irreversible infertility. Those words blurred as my eyes welled with tears. My body felt numb. My breath stuck somewhere between grief and shame. James stood beside her, my husband, the man I thought would hold me through anything. But instead of love or comfort, all I saw in his eyes was disappointment. My name is Victoria Turner. I was 28 years old living in Portland, Oregon when I learned I could never have children. Polycystic ovary syndrome. Too far gone. Too late. We spent a fortune on your treatments. James muttered like I was an investment that had failed. He didn't even look at me. Evelyn's words cut deeper than any scalpel. I told him to marry someone better, someone who could actually do her duty as a wife. I had loved James since college. I gave up my life to become what they wanted. I worked part-time at a vet clinic, cooked their meals, cleaned their pristine home, endured Evelyn's constant barbs with a smile that grew heavier each year. Maybe we should consider adoption, I whispered. Evelyn laughed. Cold, cruel, adoption. You think we want some stranger's mistake in our family? The whole point is the bloodline. And then James said the sentence that would end our marriage. My mother's right, Victoria. This changes everything. Everything I'd sacrificed. Every Sunday roast. Every holiday I arranged. Every ounce of myself I gave to their name, suddenly worthless. I wasn't a wife. I wasn't family. I was broken merchandise. And when I asked through cracked lips, "So, what are you saying?" Evelyn leaned in, smug and satisfied. You better start thinking about what you offer this family now, because right now, you're just taking up space. We walked out of that hospital in silence, but deep inside me, something had shifted. A voice I hadn't heard in years whispered, "They think they've won. They have no idea who you really are." But the real betrayal was still coming. The car ride home was silent. James's knuckles gripped the steering wheel like he was bracing for an impact that had already happened. Evelyn muttered under her breath about defective women and wasted time. I sat in the back seat like a child being driven home after a bad report card. But this wasn't a school. This was my life unraveling. As soon as we got home, Evelyn called James's father, Henry, to share the tragic news. I could hear her from the kitchen how she painted me as some deceiver who lured their poor son into marriage without ever mentioning my damaged body. She probably knew something was wrong before the wedding, she said. Some women just trap men like this. I sat there clutching the doctor's report like it was a death certificate. My marriage, my place in their family, dead. James walked in and sat across from me at the kitchen table. His tone, not sad, not soft, businesslike. "Victoria, we need to talk about our situation." I tried to reason, tried to salvage something. We could explore IVF donor eggs adoption. No, he said, cutting me off like I was a client asking for an impossible refund. "My mother and I have discussed this. We think it's best if you move out." That's when it hit me. He wasn't just breaking up with me, he was evicting me. "This is our home," I protested. "No," he corrected, "it's my family's home. You were part of that because you were supposed to give us a future, a real one. You didn't. So, why stay married?" I was stunned. All I could do was whisper. "You want a divorce, I want you gone," he said. "Take whatever personal items you brought, but the house, the car, they stay." Evelyn stood in the doorway like a villain finishing the final act. "We've been more than generous. We gave you a home, paid for your treatments. And what did we get in return? Nothing." I wanted to scream, to break something, but all I did was nod. They gave me until the next evening to leave. I had no family. My parents died in a car crash when I was 19. James and Evelyn had been my everything, or so I thought. That night, I booked a motel by the airport. The wallpaper was peeling and the sheets smelled like bleach and regret. I lay there staring at the ceiling, repeating the same question over and over. How did I let it get this far? The next morning, I returned to pack. Evelyn hovered like a vulture, making sure I didn't steal anything that belonged to the family. Wedding gifts claimed, dishes from my late mother. "We've grown fond of it," she said with a smirk. I didn't fight her. I didn't have the strength. I took my clothes, my laptop, and my mother's ring, hidden in a jewelry box they hadn't noticed. As I dragged my suitcase to the waiting cab, Evelyn delivered her final blow. "You were always too needy. James deserves someone with breeding, not a sad little orphan who was never good enough." Her words could have destroyed me. Instead, they liberated me. For the first time in years, I was free from their grip. No more fake Sunday dinners. No more comments about my body or womb. No more pretending. I was done being their broken toy. And what they didn't realize was I had just started rebuilding. I spent that first week sleeping in motels, my dignity tucked inside a thrifted suitcase. I had $67 in checking, $800 in a savings account James didn't know about, and 0 people to call. But I had one thing Evelyn and James never expected: grit. On Monday, I called in sick to the veterinary clinic. Dr. Martinez, my boss, was kind, but I kept things vague. I wasn't ready to say, hey, my in-laws threw me out because my uterus didn't come with a receipt. When I showed up that Friday to beg for more hours, Dr. Martinez surprised me. Victoria, we've been thinking of launching a mobile clinic, house calls for elderly clients. You'd be perfect to lead it. It wasn't just a promotion, it was a lifeline. I threw myself into it. Built routes, made connections, ran reports. My old self, the one who had died in that hospital hallway, was coming back stronger, sharper, smarter. I found a tiny studio apartment with cracked tiles and a view of a brick wall, but it was mine. I filled it with plants and peace and silence. No Evelyn, no judgment, just me. I was still healing, still mourning the life I thought I'd have. But for the first time in years, I felt possible. Then the phone rang. Unknown number, Seattle area code. Is this Victoria Turner? Yes. My name is David Morrison. I'm a private investigator hired to locate you about a matter of inheritance. I laughed. I think you've got the wrong girl. I don't have any living relatives. You were born Victoria Lynn Turner, March 15th. Parents Robert and Helen Turner. Yes. But Miss Turner, your father had an older brother, William. They had a falling out in their 20s. He passed away recently and left his entire estate to his only living relative. I sat down on the floor. You mean me? Yes, ma'am. William Turner was a tech entrepreneur, sold his company 3 years ago for $47 million. You are now the sole heir to approximately $52 million plus properties in Seattle and Vancouver. I dropped the phone. It wasn't a scam. David met me the next day with an attorney and a manila folder thicker than Evelyn's ego. Inside proof. And a letter from Uncle William. I searched for you for years after your parents died. I saw your wedding photos online. Saw your name change. I tried to reach out, but your in-laws made it hard to find you. I wanted you to know you're not alone. You've never been alone. I cried the way I hadn't allowed myself to since the day James looked me in the eyes and told me I was a waste. William hadn't just left me money, he left me dignity, a reset button, freedom. It took 3 months for the inheritance to go through. I didn't tell anyone. I kept working, kept living in my shoebox apartment. But inside, I was building. The day the funds cleared, I was no longer just Victoria Turner, the infertile ex-wife. I was Victoria Turner, the woman who had the power to remake everything. The first thing I did, I bought a home. Not a mansion, not some showy revenge palace, just a gorgeous modern house in Portland's Pearl District. Glass walls, natural light, clean lines. It whispered elegance. It said, I don't need to prove anything to anyone. The second thing, I honored what saved me animals. Using $2 million from my inheritance, I launched the Turner Foundation for Animal Welfare. Free veterinary care for low-income families, grants to no-kill shelters, emergency response vans, everything I wished had existed when I was struggling. People noticed. Invitations started arriving, galas, board meetings, nonprofit panels. I sat at long tables next to people who respected me not for my name or womb, but for my vision. That's where I met Alexander Kane, tall, sharp-minded, and annoyingly gentle. He ran a green energy startup and volunteered on animal rights boards. When he asked me to dinner, I said yes before I could remember to be afraid. Weeks later, sipping coffee at a local spot, I told him the truth. Not the polished PR version, the raw one, the infertility, the exile, Evelyn, James, the nights in motels, the casserole dish, the broken woman I used to be. He didn't flinch. They threw away someone extraordinary, he said. Their loss gave the world back the real you. That was the night I stopped surviving. That was the night I began living. 6 months later, Alexander proposed at his mountain cabin. No flash, no cameras, just the scent of pine and firewood and his voice saying, "I want a life with you, however it looks, wherever it takes us." You're not broken, Victoria. You're perfect. We married quietly under a canopy of fir trees, just friends. No Evelyn, no judgment. And when we shared our dreams, adoption came first. 2 children, siblings, forgotten by the system like I had once been forgotten by family. We filed the paperwork immediately. But before our new family was complete, there was one thing left for me to do. Something that had burned in my chest for 3 years. Show James and Evelyn what I had become. Not with rage, with poise, with power. With proof that everything they threw away had grown into something they could never touch again. 2 years into our marriage, we got the call. Our adoption had been approved. Twin 4-year-olds Grace and Michael, siblings, fragile, curious, full of questions. When we brought them home, they clung to us like we were gravity, watching Alexander arrange Grace's stuffed animals, reading Michael his first bedtime story. That's when I understood this was real family, not blood, not legacy, not control, love. Around the same time, the whispers started. David Morrison. My private investigator turned close friend dropped the first bombshell over lunch. The Wilson dealerships are under investigation. Odometer fraud forged service records. It's bad. I didn't gloat. Not at first. But then he said something that stopped my breath. It's been going on for years, Victoria. Likely even during your marriage, meaning the money they used for your treatments. Stolen. I sat back stunned. All those times Evelyn threw their generosity in my face. All those lectures about how they gave me everything they were using money they never rightfully earned. The irony burned so beautifully, I almost laughed. That night, as Alexander and I tucked Grace and Michael into bed, I told him everything. They're going to lose everything. And when they do, I want to be there. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. Then let's make it unforgettable, he said, kissing my forehead. The bankruptcy hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, downtown Portland, 9 a.m. I wore a dark emerald suit tailored to perfection, hair pulled back, poise locked in. Alexander walked beside me in navy blue, calm, magnetic solid. I carried 2 things, a portfolio with adoption approval and photos of Grace and Michael, a letter from Uncle William. We entered the courtroom. There they were, James, sunken eyes, wrinkled collar, hands shaking, Evelyn, hair frizzed, face pale, her lips pinched into permanent disapproval. They were whispering with their attorney, flipping pages, drowning. I walked by them slowly, deliberately, made sure my heels echoed. James looked up. His face shifted in waves confusion, recognition, shock. "Victoria," he whispered. Evelyn turned. She froze. She took in the suit, the glow, the man beside me, the air around me that said you were wrong. About everything. "Hello, James." "Evelyn," I said, like we were bumping into each other at Whole Foods. "Lovely morning, isn't it?" I walked past them and took a seat near the front row. Opened my folder. Let them see the adoption papers. Let them wonder who I was now. Let them ache. The hearing began. The judge read through their assets, or rather lack of them. The dealerships were gone. Their house sold. James was facing fraud charges. Evelyn was being investigated for conspiracy. I didn't need to speak. I just needed to be seen. And as I caught James glancing at Alexander, as I saw Evelyn's eyes flick to the adoption papers in my lap, I knew. They finally realized. The woman they'd called worthless, the woman they discarded like trash, had become untouchable. The court proceedings sealed their fate. James was sentenced to 4 years in prison for fraud. Evelyn fined, disgraced, and left with nothing but a cashier job at a grocery store, whereas I heard she spent her shifts avoiding eye contact with anyone who might recognize her. Their empire gone. their name tarnished, their pride publicly shattered. And me, I walked out of that courthouse hand in hand with the man who saw my worth before the money. The man who looked at Grace and Michael like they were the greatest treasure on earth, my family. That night, we sat on the floor of our living room, our kids building towers of blocks, the fireplace humming softly. And I thought, this is it. This is what love looks like when it's real. Not bloodlines, not breeding, not legacy, just chosen love. Unbreakable. True. Evelyn once told me I was broken, that I had nothing to offer, that I was a sad little orphan. But what she didn't realize is I was the beginning of something they could never control, never own, never silence. They saw me as a defective woman. But the truth, I was never defective. I was never disposable. I was a wildfire, and they handed me the match. I used their rejection to build a life full of purpose, passion, and people who actually saw me. Their cruelty gave me the courage to stop trying to earn love and start creating it. So to anyone out there who's ever been told you're not enough, that your worth depends on your ability to please, produce, or perform, they're wrong. You are not broken. You are not a burden. You are becoming. And when your moment comes, stand tall. Let them watch. Let them choke on every lie they ever told you. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Tell your story in the comments. Your voice matters. Like if you've ever had to rebuild from nothing. Subscribe for more stories of betrayal, power, and ultimate comeback. This was Victoria Turner, and this was how I won.